what's the breadth of the data governance content, and what are we governing with that framework? What are we running that framework through? So there are, we sort of break this into sort of 12 key areas, and these are our terminology that we use, and you may have different terminology, and that's fine, but it is important within your organization to agree on the terminology for these things, because this is often a point of great confusion and frustration when the organization starts off to do data governance and you don't agree on what a data dictionary is, right? So, which is a very common confusion, right? So, one primary area is a business glossary, right? So the business glossary is a place where you have in it the definition of your business terms. So it's not something that has thousands and thousands of entries. It probably has hundreds or in the low thousand number of entries. So what's an employee? What's an active employee? What's an adjunct professor? What is a retention rate? What's a receivable? What's a customer? All those types of things, where you're going to have a functional definition, a business definition of what those things are in the glossary. It should be agnostic, that business definition should be agnostic to the data systems that they're implemented in, right? However, additionally, you have what's called technical definitions, or what we call technical definitions, in that business glossary that says for this thing, like what is a customer, right? You have the definition of that, but then you have something that says for each data system that this exists in, what's the technical guidance on how that's lived or how that's pulled out of the system. So there's just multiple technical definitions associated with that. So that's where you get a little bit of tie that says, if I'm looking at a customer in my CRM, this is what it means. If I'm looking, or this is how I find it. And as long as it matches the business definition. And that's what we often refer to as a data dictionary in our conversation. However, we acknowledge that that's not a universal definition for data dictionary. The next area you have is the data system inventory. So this is understanding all the different data systems that you have in your organization, either big or small, what they are, where they live, why do they live, how do you get access to it, who's in charge of it, you know, what type of security classifications are on, like all sort of information at a high level about those systems. Additionally, in that data system inventory is a place to get the full data model for each one of those systems. So this is a, you know, a full describe of the technical metadata for what's in your finance system or your HR system, or the spreadsheet that Sue uses to keep track of, you know, promotions or something. Any one of those types of things. And so that data model is what some people often also refer to as a data dictionary. So that's where there gets some confusion. We like to call that a technical data model or a data model, or technical metadata. There's a couple different terms. So those are these just a separate sort of thing. Now these are very related. So a technical definition here. Like you can take your technical data model and associate it to a business glossary term through the technical definition, right? Or you can have sort of a definition that's associated to that model field, or multiple things. Some people, you know, this can be a challenge when you're talking internally. You know, some people really are focus very much on, you know, defining and tagging and augmenting the information around their data model with additional details. And that's a very important thing, like if they want security classifications or privacy codes or additional descriptions and what they might call sort of definitions above and beyond what they can get from just a straight up describe, layering that on top of the data model is an important thing. And it's not, they don't always think of that as a separate business glossary, you know, that where there might be one entry for your organization that connects to 7 different, you know, has sort of representation in 7 different data systems. So just something to think about. We could probably talk for an hour about that one topic, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. The next area of content is a data deliverables catalog. So you might hear this talked about data catalog in various ways, but this is essentially information and documentation about any processing that you have in your data. Reports, ETLs, extract, transform, loads, surveys, APIs, you know, anything that's sort of, you know, moving data either out of the system or from one system to another system. Reports and sort of information about that. We call these specifications in our system because you can also can be a catalog of a specification can be something that you're about to build or something that is built, right? So you can use the specification to define something for someone to go build, or and then once it's built, the same specification becomes a documentation for that thing as long as it's up to date. Sort of an attribute of that is lineage. It's another piece of content, so understanding how data moves from one thing to another, so tracking the lineage of movement from one system to another system. That's oftentimes sort of a derivative of an ETL documentation, but it really depends on how you implement that. Data requests is another piece of content. So how do you, if you think about requests as content itself, so who asked for this? What do they want it for? Why do they want it? When do they need it? Do we have a good specification for what they want? Is it approved? Is it valid? Is this their appropriate use for this data? Do we need a data sharing agreement for it? All this kind of stuff. But managing a request is a sort of an object that needs to be dealt with. The other type of content is essentially managing the stewards and functional classification and ownership of all of these other things. So tagging the content with information about who are the stewards, what's your functional organization set up for, structure for it, and how does that relate to the other content in the system. Data quality is another broad term that people get kind of hung up on exactly what it means. For us, we sort of simplify this into a couple different things. You've got issues, right? So someone may be reporting a data quality issue, or there may be a data quality issue found. Right? That quality issue may or may not be an actual data quality problem in the sense of there is bad data in one of your systems. It may be that someone has seen a report that says, I've got, my division did $2 million of revenue last year, but I know we did 2.5 million, so there's bad data, right? Well, that could be a definitional problem. It could be a contextual problem. It could be a problem with the report. It could be a misunderstanding, or it could be bad data. It could be one of those things. But the issue itself is this acknowledgement of there's a potential data quality. In the resolution process around that, you will discover, like, okay, do we actually have real bad data, or what? Do we need to fix a report, or do we need to update a definition or some documentation so someone better understands what this is, or is there actually an issue, right? If there's issue, that can become a rule, right? You can clean it up and say, oh, the problem really was that we've got some misclassified, revenue, or things that have a null classification on it, or whatever, and you can say, all revenue must be classified with at least one department or a primary department, or however you want to specify that, and that becomes a rule. Once you have a rule, you can have assessments, right? So the assessments is, all right, so we've got that. We have 0 ones of those problems, or we've got 100,000 revenue entries, and there are 3 of them that violate that rule. That's an assessment. Monitoring is the sort of the process of doing those assessments, right? Be it automated or manual, right? So that's the data quality and how we think about data quality. Related to, and somewhere in there's this concept of reference data. So reference data is the list of code values, or the list of statuses or whatever that you've got in your system, and how you're managing those, both as a master list or by data system, and the relationship between them. And that can just be helpful to understand and manage informationally, but also those can become valuable things for data quality to look at valid values, things like that. Right. The next step is sort of the concept of these policy attributes that you're going to assign to the different pieces of content: data access rules, security classifications, data sharing agreements, privacy codes and classifications, and those things that are all attributes that you're going to put on definitions and data systems and data model objects and reports and things like that. Change management, we mentioned, like the dependency between things and the versioning. Policies are sort of managing, overarching documents and strategies and policies, and the versions of those, and the approval of those, and the signs off, and the publishing and sharing of those content. And then external data standards and reporting. So you've got your own set of all this content that is managed by you, but there's also things that you are going to look at for definitions and reports that you have to submit, and other things that are actually external from your control. So you're getting it from a regulatory agency, you're getting it from a consortium that you're a part of, or from a vendor that you're a part of. So how do you keep those things up to date and synchronize with what you've got in your system to make sure that you are compliant with the most recent version of that? So that's my rundown of the content.